Good morning, everyone. My name is Allison Morong, and I'm the Chief of the Biosolids Division at the Maryland Department of the Environment. I have a sample of sewage sludge that I'm going to pass around to you. This is an example of a Class A sewage sludge. Check that out as I'm talking about our regulations and our policies at the Maryland Department of the Environment. After my presentation, Lisa will be presenting. And I know she'll talk a little bit more about the sort of practical side of the sewage sludge and the land application. Sewage sludge has been regulated in Maryland since 1974. It's been land applied a lot longer than that, but wasn't really regulated until the 70s. There are laws that talk about how sewage sludge is going to be utilized, and then we have regulations that kind of give more details on that. So if you want to read the full regulations, they're in COMAR 260406. In 2014, we put forward new regulations, and so we've been working with those for the last 3 years. And something that's important to know is that a site-specific permit has to be issued prior to utilization of sewage sludge. So what is sewage sludge? Sewage sludge is not raw sewage. It's one of the final end products of the wastewater treatment process. It's a nutrient-rich organic product. Treatment kills disease-causing organisms. And then what's left after that is the sewage sludge. Further treatment of the sewage sludge has to be done in order for it to be land applied. So it goes through multiple steps before you can get to a product that can be land applied. So how do we regulate the sewage sludge? We regulate it at the wastewater treatment plant. We monitor the treatment of the sewage sludge. We do it through site-specific permits. So a site where land application is happening, for a Class B sewage sludge, they would have to have a site-specific permit for that. We do compliance and enforcement, so we have inspectors that go out and monitor where sewage sludge land application is happening. We also do a lot of compliance checks in the office. There's a lot of record keeping and reporting requirements with it as well. So there are specific treatment requirements that the sewage sludge has to meet in order for it to be land applied. It must meet EPA's 40 CFR Part 503 regulations. So those are the federal regulations that talk about sewage sludge, and they lay out really specific treatment requirements. Sewage sludge sources have to be permitted for land application. So the wastewater treatment plants that generate the sewage sludge, they have to go through a process to be approved. So what we do is we review their historical analysis. We look at how they're treating the sewage sludge. We do inspections of the facility to make sure that they are continuing to meet that treatment process that they have been permitted to meet. There's ongoing monitoring of nutrients, metals, PCB content, and then of course record keeping, annual reporting requirements. They have to continue to provide us information so that we can continue to ensure that they are in compliance with the treatment methods. Currently, there are 37 sources of Class B sewage sludge that are approved for land application in Maryland. Again, as part of the treatment requirements, there are constituent limits. So there are certain metals that are monitored to make sure that those metals are below a certain threshold in the sewage sludge. There are pathogen reduction requirements. So for Class A and Class B, those are two different levels of treatment. So it's the same sludge. Class A is treated further than Class B, but they both go through a lot of treatment. So Class A, the pathogens are below detectable limits. With Class B, the sewage sludge has pathogens that can be detected, but they are very, very low, and there are additional control measures that make it safe for land application. There are vector attraction reduction requirements. So a vector is something like a fly or a rat or something like that that would carry a disease, and so we have to make sure that the sewage sludge is not attractive to them. So there are methods, which I'll discuss in a minute, that we make sure that it's not an attractive thing for them. A sewage sludge that's land applied for agricultural sites must meet certain constituent limits. So again, these are the metal requirements. And this comes from EPA, and there's these 4 different tables. And so depending on how you're going to land apply, there's sort of combinations of these tables that you would want to use. So for sewage sludge, it can't exceed table 1. And it must meet either table 2 or table 3. So those are kind of a little detailed, but again, there's a lot of different requirements that they have to meet. For treatment, again, for Class B, in order to meet that Class B treatment, There are 3 different ways that they can do it. They can do it by monitoring of the indicator organisms, so they can test for Salmonella and E. coli. There's the use of a PSRP. A PSRP stands for a process to significantly reduce pathogens. And so that's a very specific process, and I'll get into more detail about that in just a minute. And then you can use a process that's equivalent to PSRP. For Class A, there's more alternatives. You can thermally treat them. You can treat them with a high pH, high temperature process. You can treat them with another process. These are EPA's kind of definitions of how you meet these. They can be treated with an unknown process, but you can still use the process to prove that it is meeting the treatment standards. The use of a PSRP, which is a process to further reduce pathogens, or a process equivalent to a PSRP. So usually what people do is they meet the process to further reduce pathogens, PSRP. I'll get into more details of that too. So PSRP, again, that's for the Class B treatment methods. And these are some of the defined methods that you can use to meet that Class B requirement. So you can use aerobic digestion or anaerobic digestion. So those are biological treatment processes. For aerobic digestion, it's in the presence of oxygen, and there's a time and a temperature requirement. So they have to meet a certain temperature for a certain length of time. For aerobic digestion, that's, again, biological treatment in the absence of oxygen. And again, there's that temperature and time requirement that they have to meet. Lime stabilization is another way that they can do it, and it raises the pH. It has to be at 12 for 2 hours. You can air dry it. It has to be out for a minimum of 3 months. This is not a very common method because it takes a lot of land in order to do that. At least not here. Somewhere out in the desert might be more common. For composting, that's another method. We don't typically see that with Class B sewage sludge because you can also use composting to meet Class A requirements. And so typically if people put forth the effort to get to a Class B with the composting, they'll go all the way to Class A. So for Class A, these are PFRP processes. So there's composting, there's heat drying where the moisture content is reduced to 10% or less. There's heat treatment where you bring the temperature of the sewage sludge up to above 180 degrees for 30 minutes. There's thermophilic aerobic digestion. So again, it's aerobic digestion, but with the addition of more heat. There's beta ray or gamma ray irradiation. We don't see any of that in Maryland, but it is a possibility. There's also pasteurization, where temperature is at 70 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. So these are just some of the different methods that have been kind of documented as definitely able to meet this process. Again, this is for PFRP, this is the Class A sewage sludge. So for vector attraction, again, that's how you make it less attractive to the flies and the rats and different things like that. There are 10 different options. I'm not going to go through each one, but there's 10 different ways that you can do that. And a lot of these are done in conjunction with the treatment method. If they can't be done at the same time as the treatment method, then they have option 10, which is to just incorporate the sewage sludge into the ground at the time of land application. So now that we've treated the sewage sludge, we have different options in how to use it. It can be used for agricultural land application. And again, it has to meet either Class A or Class B treatment in order for it to be land applied. It can be done on agricultural land. It can be done on a reclamation site, which would be like a mine. After a mine has been being mined, they reclaim the land. Another example would be a landfill. After a landfill has been filled, they will reclaim the surface of it as well. So sewage sludge can be used to kind of restore that land. Sewage sludge that's a Class A, that's the higher level of treatment, can be distributed to the public, so you can purchase it at Home Depot and use it in your own yards. It can be used for energy generation, so there's a facility out in Carroll County that burns it as an alternative fuel. If it has not met the treatment requirements, so if it's not Class A, not Class B, it can go to a landfill as another option for disposal. You just have to make sure it doesn't have the free liquid, so landfills won't accept it if it still has a high percentage of moisture. It can be incinerated. There's a few places in Maryland that are still doing this, but it's not common. It's very expensive because there's so much water. You're basically incinerating water, so it's not very cost effective. And then every once in a while, we'll see people come and request to do an innovative or a research project. So they want to test out different ideas that they have for the sewage sludge. So why is the sewage sludge land applied? Sewage sludge is land applied because it is recycling a byproduct. Sewage sludge is produced every single day at the wastewater treatments across the state, and it needs to have somewhere to go. So land application is one method of using it. It returns essential nutrients to the soil. So it has nitrogen, it has phosphorus, it has zinc, it has copper, it has things that plants need to grow. It adds organic matter back to the soil. It reduces the fertilizer cost of farmers. It has a high water content, so it provides water back to the crops as well. And some sewage sludge, depending on its treatment, so if it was treated with a lot of lime, it would still contain all of that lime, and then it goes back to the farm fields to raise the pH of the fields. So that could be an additional benefit to the farmers who are receiving that. But it is regulated, and it's regulated to protect the public health and the environment, to ensure that the sewage sludge is properly treated to reduce and kill the pathogens, to make sure that the metals that are in the sewage sludge are safe for land application, and to make sure that the quality of ground and surface water of the state is protected. If somebody is interested in applying a Class B sewage sludge to their farm, they would need to have a permit from us. So Class A sewage sludge can be distributed generally, is permitted at the wastewater treatment plant, and then can be used after that without a site-specific permit. But Class B sewage sludge has to have a site-specific permit. So they would need to submit an application form. They would have to have the owner's consent form signed by the legal owners of the site. There's a site information form that includes information about the fields, size of the fields, the pH of the soil is required, the coastal plain soil pH management advisory form. So the farmer has to acknowledge if it's in that area that they understand that the pH of the soils could be affected by the land application of sewage sludge, and the manganese can be affected by that. Their sewage sludge sources have to be listed on their permit application. They're required to submit a topographic map, a site-specific map that shows where the houses are, where the roads are, where streams and ponds and things like that. Anything that would be on the site would be included in that site-specific map. Sewage sludge analysis would be required to be submitted if it isn't already on our files. And that would include information about the sewage sludge's percent solids, pH, the nutrients, the metals, how much lime is in the sewage sludge. So that would be required to be submitted if we don't already have that analysis. There's regular ongoing analysis submittal requirements from the facilities. They also need to include a soil survey map, a tax map, a detailed operation plan on how they propose to do the work out in the field, the haul route that they're going to take, what roads are the trucks going to go down, and a performance bond or other financial security needs to come with the application as well. In addition to that, they are required to submit a nutrient management plan, and that nutrient management plan is required to be done in accordance with MDA's requirements. So when they go out to do the land application, there are requirements for that as well. The soil has to be at a minimum of P6, a pH of 6. There are slope restrictions, so they can only apply on places where the slopes aren't. Depends a little bit on how the land application is happening, but there's slope requirements. There's adverse weather condition restrictions, so they're not allowed to apply on a frozen ground, for example. The trucks are to be cleaned on site, so they're not dragging sewage sludge onto the public roads or soil out onto the public roads. The buffer areas have to be clearly marked. So buffers are sort of setbacks from which they cannot apply the sewage sludge. So there's setbacks from houses, there are setbacks from the public road, there are setbacks from waterways. And they are a little different if they're just being surface applied or if they're being incorporated or injected. If it's just surface applied, the buffers are a little larger. After sewage sludge land application, signs may be posted at the edge of the fields. So if it's an area where there's a good likelihood of public contact, then there might be some signs that are posted at the edge of the fields just to let people know that sewage sludge has been applied there. Animal grazing is restricted for 30 days. Public access to the site is controlled for a year, and no crops can be eaten raw by humans for 3 years after that. So sewage sludge is not usually applied to food crops. It's usually applied for hay, soybeans, wheat, alfalfa, things that would not be directly consumed by people. Land application permits are issued for 5 years, and they can be renewed after that. Prior to the land application, the company that's going to do the work has to contact us and let us know that they're going to do that work. They also have to contact the county health department. That lets our inspectors know where the work is going to be done so that our inspectors can be going out to the site to monitor what's going on. In the permit, there are record keeping and reporting requirements. They do need to let us know what they've applied, how much, where, for what crops. They keep those records, they send copies to us, we keep them. So if you are writing a plan for a site that has sewage sludge applied on it, you would definitely want to contact the farmer to see if they have records, or if they don't, we have the records as well as to what happened there previously. The control measures that we have are designed to protect the public health and the environment, and there have been no known cases of disease transmission or contamination of drinking water supplied from the land application of sewage sludge. If you're interested in additional information about sewage sludge, we do have the Maryland Department of the Environment's website. Another good source of information is the EPA website. Additional questions another day. This is our contact information. Feel free to give us a call anytime. And with that, I'll take any questions that people might have.